Good morning, everybody. I'll now take the opportunity to call this meeting to order. I want to say a special welcome to the Auditor General and all the members of his department for being here this morning. And I also want to thank the members of the public who are in the public gallery and the members of the media who are present. The purpose of this meeting and all Public Accounts Committee meetings is to discuss reports that are before us provided by the Auditor General. In this particular case, we are engaging, and this is for the citizens of the country to understand, we are engaging the Auditor General himself and the report for the fiscal year 2015-16. And basically that report deals with the accounts, public accounts of Trinidad and Tobago, and it takes us from the 30th of September, 30th of August, is that right? First of October 2015 to September 30th, 2016. What we will explore, since we have the benefit of the Auditor General here, who basically monitors the performance of government in financial terms and all the sectors of government, certainly the ministries and the statutory agencies. Since he's here with us, we want to get from him the benefit of his knowledge and his exposure over the last year and exposure over the last several years, so that we can understand what kinds of issues persist, what has gotten better, what might have gotten worse. And we certainly want to take into account the recommendations that he may have or members of his staff may have, in which we can continue to improve in terms of managing the accounts of the country. So we will be hearing from the Auditor General the challenges that are being faced by him and other key stakeholders at the Office of the Auditor General's Department. And we would like to be able to propose possible solutions to some of these challenges. The role of this committee is to help the Auditor General's Department, the ministries, and other government departments improve the delivery of services in an efficient and effective and economic manner. And we take that particular job seriously. I say to the members who might be listening or hearing or somehow connected with this program that this meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live on the Parliament's Channel 11 and on Radio 105.5 FM and on Parliament's YouTube channel ParlView. And if viewers are interested in making their comments known related to today's program, you can send an email to parl101@ttparliament.org, or on Facebook, facebook.com/ttparliament, or Twitter @ttparliament. So what I will do is, first of all, to ask the Auditor General and his team if they would introduce themselves. And secondly, that I'll have the Auditor General follow that by making a statement before we start the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you and members of your committee and support staff. I am Majid Ali, Auditor General.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. I am Lorelly Pujadas, Deputy Auditor General.
Good morning, all. Gary Peters, Assistant Auditor General.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nicole, Cockburn, Legal Officer, Auditor General's Department.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Gale, Serville, Audit Executive 2.
Good morning. I'm Rajkumari Mohammed, Audit Executive 2, Upton.
Good morning. I am Brian Caesar, Audit Executive 2.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Neela Dwarkali, Audit Director.
Okay. Auditor General, could you make your opening statement, and then as I start the questions, I'll have members of our committee introduce themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, it is a pleasure being here to discuss my report on the public accounts for 2016 with you and your committee. Mr. Chairman, in my examination of the public accounts for 2016, it was observed that there had not been much improvement in certain areas which were reported on in the 2015 report. These areas certainly continue to draw attention. The first area of concern is the rental of unoccupied properties. A total of $65.3 million was paid for the rental of 4 unoccupied properties by ministries and departments over a period of time. One of these ministries paid a total of $53.5 million from December 2012 to July 2016. However, payment has since ceased. 2 entities continue to pay rental, while one took up occupancy in March 2017. As you all can see, public funds were not and still are not being utilized in the most efficient way. Another critical area is the internal audit function in ministries and departments, which appears to be very weak. I understood that this matter is being addressed with the aim that accountability, transparency, and good governance can be achieved. Rental payment without lease agreements, proper maintenance of inventory records, and the tagging of items, as well as overpayments, continue to be a major concern for my department. Finally, my department anxiously awaits the full implementation of the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act, which promises to improve transparency and accountability in all government agencies. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Auditor General, Mr. Majid Ali, and I will ask the members of my team to introduce themselves. My name is Bo Tiwari. I'm the chair of the committee.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lester Henry. Yes. Morning, everyone. Lester Henry, member of the committee.
Good morning, everyone. Roger Samuel, member.
Good morning, Ayana Webster Roy, member.
Okay. We have excuses from some members of the committee who are caught in cabinet, and one is unwell. But we start the questions this morning, and we begin to engage you, Auditor General, and the team. I will start with some of the issues that you yourself flagged. I mean, you mentioned the rental of unoccupied properties. You mentioned the weakness of the internal audit function. You mentioned the inventory records, the repeated overpayments. You mentioned the anxiety with which you hope for the proclamation of the procurement legislation to allow that to function. All of these issues were flagged last year based on the report. And we examined some of those issues in relation to individual ministries as we did the engagement of those ministries. What do you think accounts for the persistence of these bad practices and the fact that they are just not going away? What is the problem, and do you have a solution for it? You can take them one by one. Yeah.
Well, first with the rental of unoccupied properties, I think it's taken too long for these ministries to get into the agreement to occupy these properties. Yeah, the process of getting it equipped and getting cabinet approval is a long period of time. And that is why they have payments being made to this amount for these properties.
Okay, as I understand the structure of this, a ministry would want a building. They would indicate that to property management, or property management may give them an option of what buildings they might use. And then it is then up to property management to arrange a contract. Is that it, after cabinet approves?
Just if may, Chair, if I may. Property Real Estate Division is there to facilitate the process of ministries and department getting rental accommodation. However, what is required is that a ministry would indicate that they need a particular rental of particular space in a particular area in a location. They may even identify some particular options. The Real Estate Division is then working with the Valuation Division. They will determine what is the correct rate of value that is supposed to be applicated, and then they would write back to the ministry and the department and say, okay, this is a value. Do you have any objection? Do you have any objection to the location? So there's a negotiation in terms of that process. After that process has been sorted out, Property and Real Estate Division is actually the division that is responsible for crafting the cabinet note and seeking the cabinet approval. Once that has been done, a contractual arrangement is entered into, but the contractual arrangement is between the ministry and the department and the provider of the rental accommodation. That entire process can be somewhat lengthy and time-consuming, and that, in fact, could account for some of the delays and the issues that we have seen arising.
No, but couldn't a simpler adjustment be made so that the contract is organized for rent to be paid from the time the building is outfitted according to specifications, and that would put more additional pressure on the property owner to do it quickly, because his rental will be determined by how quickly he completes the building, rather than to have a situation where he really doesn't care how long it takes to outfit the building as long as he's getting his rent. So couldn't that simple matter be addressed?
Right. I agree with you that the process needs to be evaluated and reviewed. I think what needs to happen, though, Chair, I think, and Mr. Ali would agree, is that there needs to be a look at it holistically and look at the map out the entire process in terms of what takes place, identify the key weakness points, and so it needs to be a coordinated effort between all the parties concerned. So to develop a system that would be more in keeping with up-to-date trends and that could account for things happening in a more efficient manner. I think right now, I think Mr. Peters may want to comment on that, but we tend to function in all aspects in ministries and departments in a sense of silos. So we deal with our bit, somebody else deals with their bit, and somebody else deals with their bits, and the silos are not necessarily coordinated or speaking. Gary wants to say something.
Yeah, well, I mean, if a private sector person were getting a property to rent, I don't think that private sector person would pay for the time of outfitting from the property owner. The private sector person would either establish the contract with his right to fix the building however he wants inside, or he will have the building outfitted according to specifications and pay from that point, wouldn't it?
No, in the case where they had spent the $53.5 million, they were paying for a shell.
Yes.
And it's the ministry needs to outfit the building to their specification.
They were going to do it themselves?
Yes, and that's the process. It was taking a bit long because they had to obtain the necessary partitions and all the furniture and fixtures. And each time they have to go back to Parliament to get new approval while the rent is being paid for that shell.
Gary, what's that?
Yeah, but, I mean,
Mr. Chairman, if I could, any move of that magnitude has to take a lot of planning, and I think that is where it's a bit deficient. So they need to examine exactly what they need, when they need to move, establish some key milestones, and that is what is missing, I think.
so you're flagging two issues, one coordination and the other one is planning. Sorry.
I'm trying to understand then, what is the legal basis for the payments? If you don't have a lease or whatever, how does this work?
No, well, they have a lease because they are already found the property. Contract has been drawn up, but it's up to the ministry to furnish that building.
So, but no, yeah, in the case of the empty building, the shell, right? I understand that's how it worked in that case, but in other cases, how does that work? Where they actually rent a building that's fully furnished. Does that happen?
Yes, that does occur, and in that situation, the basis would be an existing contract, but just not finalized in writing. But the contract would exist based on the exchange of documents with the relevant details, but the finalized, approved contract would be missing in most cases. But I don't want to say occupation, but the access that is needed by the tenant for potentially outfitting the building, the access itself is the point at which the contract would be deemed to start. And even to secure the property, to prevent the landlord from advertising elsewhere or granting a lease elsewhere, and for your right of access to do what you need to do to see about outfitting the building, that is the point from which the payments would have to start, whether the final contract document is ready or not.
Oh, okay.
Is there an unwritten understanding from your point of view? I mean, you've been examining these things for years. Is there an unwritten understanding that the choice of a building by government is somehow an act equivalent to an act of patronage, and that the landlords, what can I say, treatment of the government in that case, whether it's a ministry or some other governmental institution, is less, what can I say, less in terms of accountability and service and responsibility than it would be in the private sector market?
I cannot comment on that because we actually look at what the ministry's process is in terms of occupying the building, and we do not look at the landlord or any other aspect.
Okay, but I mean, if something persists like this, there must be some endemic problem. I mean, it cannot, you know, if you have a problem that just will not go away, and no matter what you do, it persists, then it seems to me that there are extenuating circumstances that need to be taken into account. And if we want to solve the problem, then we have to clinically assess what the problems are and what they might be. So I'm just asking, given your own experience and your scrutiny power on all of these things.
Well, I cannot say at this moment because It's a matter that we haven't looked at when we conduct our audit.
Okay, fine. I'll just spread around the questions.
Through you, Chair, I know we've been discussing the issue of the lease arrangements as well as the rental arrangements. And you reiterated that there were situations where there were leases, but the occupation problem was the issue. What about those times when no signed leases came, but they were paid rent? How is that possible?
If I may, well, I guess what is being overlooked is that contracts exist in law without necessarily written documents. A binding contract could exist orally, not in writing, or even not with the final formal contractual document. And the documents which are exchanged between the parties and the cabinet approvals, etc., to occupy certain premises at certain rates are deemed sufficient, and the payments start on that basis, which is permissible in law, but not best practice for government to protect the government's interest, of course.
But it would seem that though the Auditor General's department has been flagging this issue for many, many years, because this has reoccurred from year to year, there seems to be no real improvement in the process, because over the period of time, you have flagged this in all of your reports that ministries and agencies are not having signed leases and stuff like that. And now we realize it's reoccurring again in 2016, the fact that it has not improved. What are your recommendations?
I would just want to add to what Ms. Cockburn has said. You also have instances which is actually quite prevalent in the public service at this point in time, that ministries are existing in current accommodation, which had previously had contracts. But the process requires them for renewal, requires them to go back over the same process. And that same process could be time consuming. So in the meantime, they've already been occupying the process under previous contractual obligations. And so Property Real Estate will give them permission to continue to exist on a month-to-month basis. So they will have a month-to-month basis until such time as the valuation has been done as to whether or not there should be an increase in the payment of rental. So that too is also another component. So I think, again, it comes back to what we have been saying, that the endemic problem really, I think, has to be reviewed from a process point of view, because the process in itself is very timely, time-consuming, and impacts on ministries and departments' ability to actually comply with the legislation.
And I understand what you just said, but if you revisit the Auditor General's report for previous years, you would find that if you've traced the ministries that are culpable, you're saying that in some instances the ministry takes 5 and 6 and 7 years to get a lease arrangement for a building that they occupy already, that they're in, and something has to be absolutely wrong.
If I may, there is apparently one government department or division with responsibility for processing leases across government, and it seems as though that department continues to be plagued with public service issues such as staff shortages, lack of training, inefficient processes, etc. So I remember on the last occasion we did explore somewhat the possibility of decentralizing that responsibility for processing leases and have that responsibility lie with each ministry or department. But I think at present it continues to reside with one department having responsibility for so many entities and simply not enough staff and resources to process in a more timely manner.
Thank you. Actually, the question will be both for the legal officer and deputy Auditor General noted the process as the main concern. And legal officer just mentioned that a recommendation was made on how the process could be improved.
I believe on the last occasion here, more or less informally, between the committee and us, yes, it was the possibility was discussed.
Okay, so my question was, did the Auditor General's office make any formal recommendation on how the process could be improved, and if any ministry, any department, any attempts were made to implement the recommendations?
I think at this point, our recommendations have been contained within the recommendations of the report itself. We recognize that over the last year, since this report was done and since we appeared, various other committees, the Joint Select Committee on the Public Administration have taken up dealing with this particular issue. And they have since made some recommendations, which I believe that as an office we are overviewing and reviewing to see how best that can be implanted into our own programs as well. But for a formal approach, we have not yet done, except for what is here in the report.
Okay, a couple of questions. I want to ask a question on inland revenue. The first issue is a follow-up question to the continuing tension between Auditor General's office and Inland Revenue Division. The tension has to do with your access to information to be able to do, from your point of view, your work properly. What is the status of that now? Because I know on the last occasion, suggestions were made, that's a year ago, and we, as a committee, made recommendations to support your position. What is the situation now?
On behalf of the Auditor General, I am very happy to report that the necessary amendment has in fact been drafted by the Ministry of the Attorney General, the amendment to Section 4 of the Income Tax Act, which does promise to grant the level of access that the Auditor General deems fit to the information held by the BIR. Our office, we have met several times. We have met more than once on this issue with the Ministry of the Attorney General to fine-tune the amendment to make sure it meets all our needs. And we actually have another meeting carded for next week, Tuesday, with them, and the amendment is moving full steam ahead.
Okay, so you're making progress there.
Yes.
And this is by collaborative decision and support.
Yes, we are working together with the Board of Inland Revenue and the Attorney General's office.
Okay. Now, what you would require, or what that amendment would enable you to do, would involve more intensive investigation into the operations of what is essentially a major revenue collector, who deals with both corporate and private individuals in the society, having to do with the implementation of taxation policy, right? Not so? Now, are there any issues that need to be resolved that have to do, because the original thing had to do with privacy issues, not so? Are there issues that are going to come up with the clause that amends the Section 4?
When you say issues, you mean privacy issues?
Yes.
Well, yes, but those issues have been adequately addressed in the sense that the Income Tax Act requires employees at the BIR itself to take an oath of secrecy.
Secrecy, yes.
And the Exchequer and Audit Act actually empowers the Auditor General to require his own staff to take that same oath. So the protection will be as good as the protection that exists at the BIR itself.
Okay. And the other thing I want to say is that your report, the Auditor General's reports, talks about weaknesses in internal control, in addition to lack of access to information that you highlight in the report. Now, I find it surprising that you would have the issue of weaknesses in internal control arise in the Inland Revenue Department. Can you elaborate a little bit about that?
Chairman, the weaknesses, I think, arose from the expenditure side of the financial statement.
Okay.
Not respect to the...
Only on the expenditure side?
Well, we haven't taken an in-depth look at the revenue, as you would have known.
Yes.
But from the expenditure side, like in any other ministry department, there will be some weaknesses as a result of staffing, training, these kinds of things.
And the Auditor General in his presentation highlighted the weakness, the persistent weaknesses of the internal audit function across the governmental system. And I just found it surprising that that would also exist at Inland Revenue. And that if it is so pervasive, what are we going to do about these internal audit capabilities in the ministry? What recommendation can we make that would help you and that would help the ministries?
I think that matter is being dealt with by the Controller of Accounts, and they are looking at it when they are implementing the information management system, IFMIS system. So they are looking at it from that point of view in terms of getting qualified people in the internal audit units.
So you think technology would be part of the solution, is what you're saying?
Yes, technology plus qualified personnel, both in IT and financial audit.
And you are satisfied that that would make a big difference?
It would make a big difference because right now we are just using the internal audit as a check-in unit.
Okay. The other question I want to ask has to do with the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, and that is because it came up last time and I just want to follow up. You know, in your report on page 52, no evidence was seen that oil and gas production data received from the companies and used in the calculation of revenue collectible was verified by the ministry. So that was something that now persists. The response from the ministry stated that verification of oil and gas data is undertaken by ensuring the witnessing and testing of calibration of meters at fiscalization points and witnessing of meters at loading of crude at ports. The following were noted. There is no collaboration between the measurement unit and the contract management unit. A log is not maintained to reflect the queries raised by the contract management unit with the operators and the resolutions made. And the measurement unit is constrained by a shortage of manpower and a lack of measurement training. As a result, 75% of the planned activities was not done. I mean, 75% is a high number. As a result, the accuracy of revenue from royalties and share of profits from oil companies could not be assessed. At the time of the audit in January 2017, royalties from 11 oil companies as at 30th September were still outstanding. Quarterly and annual reconciliations of royalties due and received were not produced for 9 of the 11 oil companies. These are required by the Petroleum Regulations, Chapter 6201, paragraphs 71 to 2 and 71 1 to 3. Now, I mean, from the point, this may sound more alarming than it is, but it does sound alarming. It means that the governmental system has no way of verifying the accuracy of the revenues that are due to it. Now, I would say that at the very minimum, this is a little disconcerting and, I mean, really downright disturbing. I mean, how can we solve this? I mean, this is not something that we should wait until next year to bring another report and say the same thing happening.
Chairman, I think the Ministry of Energy would be the proper people to
But have
take
you
control.
recommended anything to them besides highlighting the issues here? Because we examined the Ministry of Energy, we raised these issues with them very strongly last year, and we're going to raise it again.
Well, actually, for this financial year, we will be going deeper into the revenue. We are expanding our scope into revenue.
Okay.
And these are this particular, the oil and gas production data, we will be going into more detail this year.
As an aside question, is the Auditor General's department being consulted, or do you consider that you should be consulted on the transfer pricing issues that are likely to emerge in the energy sector for consideration and decision?
It's something worth considering, but we will have we'll have to acquire some expertise in that area. We have no resident oil and gas experts on our side, so it's something that we will need to contract outside.
Okay, but I mean, do you think that you should know something about what is happening there in order to properly assess whether we are getting...
Yeah, it would be helpful to delve into something like that.
Okay. All right, I have some other questions, but I will share with my colleagues. Minister Webster, do you have questions?
Mr. Auditor General, in your opening statement, you noted that there wasn't much improvement to previous years, right? The accounting officer is not the politician, but in the public domain, it is the politician who usually gets the criticism, and the public usually will look at the politician as the one who's at fault. In terms of the report, and you identified that there wasn't much improvement, what would you recommend as a way of bringing accounting officers in line to ensure they follow the rules and regulations and to ensure there is more efficiency and more accountability?
I think that's a matter for the Minister of Finance to address, because this information is all the rules and regulations that comes out from the Ministry of Finance. So he has to address all these problems. Yeah,
go ahead.
If I may add, as we may know, there are existing penalties for accounting officers and other persons not complying with regulations governing financial management. The legislation which allows for the penalty is under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Finance. That ministry may want to look at possibly enforcing the penalty in certain cases where deemed necessary, and currently also the penalty is quite low. So even if it's enforced, it may not have much of an effect. That ministry also has the power to amend the penalty to make it more serious, more grave. And also, one final thing, in terms of accounting officers, just one side point, quite often these officers also have other issues to contend with, resources that they do not always have full control over. So maybe a holistic view of what exactly is contributing to the inability to comply with the regulations could also be looked at hand in hand with the possibility of a penalty.
Okay. In terms of the penalties, internationally, what is a best practice?
Well, international best practice is actually moving away from penalizing accounting officers.
Okay.
They are moving away from micromanagement in terms of many little rules to follow, and they're more looking at macro management and management control, and assisting accounting officers to come up with policies that would To sum it up, they're looking more at macro level controls as opposed to micro management and adherence to many small rules. Not small, but
If I may add, before we reach the level of penalties, I would want to say that we properly train our accounting officers so that they really understand their roles and responsibilities with regard to the whole accounting function, because I think we have a lot of inexperienced accounting officers, permanent secretaries now. So that may be adding to the problem. So I think the first step in the whole process should be looking at training so that they really understand their roles and responsibilities before we get to even talking about penalties. And
So we have to look at more capacity building.
yes, that is what I'm saying, capacity building. Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
Another question I want to raise, because I want to ask my questions and move on. Every time I meet constituents, and I know this is an issue I always raise, and I guess you know where I'm coming from, and that's the whole issue of the pension and leave, yes. And it seems to be pervasive. It's every report, it's every year, it's every time I visit a community, that issue would come up. Are we seeing any improvements at all in that line?
At present, I will just tell you at present where we are at, because we are like the final stage, it comes for verification. So at present, I would give you like just what we have, and that'll to tell you, like we have 864 files with us at present. The majority of those files actually are not for people who have yet to been paid. 770 of those are revised. So what does that mean? It basically means that this is the issue that is arising and that causes delay. An employee has a pension and leave record, right? That pension and leave record goes with that employee from department to department, ministry to ministry. That pension and leave record is required to be updated annually, right? Now that pension and leave record, if I am acting and I go to another ministry and I have not gotten my delegated approval or my first approval from Service Commission, so I go to another ministry. They put me at the lowest point. That is not necessarily the point where I'm supposed to be because I've acted for enough. All of these things, therefore, when it comes to your end point and have to be computed and evaluated, has to be verified, right? And if you are at the wrong point from way back when, your record has to be adjusted. Added to which, let's say, for example, we have our union agreements are not timely. So I have retired, and retroactively, things happen. It means that your pension and leave record has to be adjusted. It means your pension and leave record has to go back to the Treasury. It means your pension and leave record has to come back to audit. That's why we have revised, because it means that you now have to get a revision to your gratuity and a revision to your monthly payments. So if you look at it, what is really happening is because of the way we do our record, which is this pension and leave record, manually. So oftentimes, the delay is not with Treasury or with the Auditor General. The delay might be ministries, because I might be at 4 or 5 different ministries down the road. Ministry number 2 has not done what they were supposed to do, and that impacts all the way through my service. So we are looking at the fact that we have an IRIS system. The IRIS system does have the facility, but it is not being utilized at this point in time. To put what you call the return of personnel onto the IRIS system, and it also has a module that deals with pension and leave. So it would basically means that at source, the data goes in at source, and then therefore, whether I go to a next ministry, my record is automatically transferred and the information is already up to date. But with this manual system, it has a significant impact. And basically, this is what is happening, and this is what has happened throughout time, right? And this is basically the delay. So like, for example, we have maybe a 2-month delay. I can't say what delay Treasury has. But the point is that the real issue is from someone's pension and leave record from source.
But what is causing the delay in implementing that electronic system?
You would have to probably address that question to public admin.
Public admin. Okay.
This matter was first addressed when they implemented the IRIS system, and they said that if it was implemented at that time, when an employee leaves 33 years from now, he'd have gotten his check in his hand when he left. So far, that module has not been implemented. So it's the Ministry of Public Admin need to answer those questions.
Okay. Thank you.
It's a sad time in our existence where computers have existed for so long and softwares have been developed and advanced so much, but yet the public service, when it comes to a simple thing like gratuity, is struggling. It's tough. I have had people just recently retired 5 years ago, died last week, nothing. It's a sad state of affairs. I want to, I'm looking at the construction of the Couva Children's Hospital. It's on page 65 of your report. And you have two ministries based on a cabinet note. Well, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development that was responsible for the project, and UDCOT was appointed as the executing agency. But at the end of your statements here on page 66, it says that as at the date of the signing of this report, no update was received. Both ministries, meaning the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, have denied responsibility for the project. How is that possible? That is madness.
I think the problem is they both denied that they were responsibility for submitting a status. Maybe it was worded wrong, but as the status, we just asked for a status on the project. And we were referred to, each one referred us to the other one. Because they could, and that's how it went. We just couldn't get a status as at that particular date.
But isn't that crazy?
That's why it found its way into the report.
That's why it's there.
But this is embarrassing. This is an embarrassment to an institution, to administration. This is embarrassing where people that have responsibilities for things cannot give you a status report as the Auditor General's department. I wish you could find them. I wish you could penalize them. I wish you could, tell them pay, because if this continues, and it doesn't have to be just the Couva Children's Hospital, it could be anything, and any other major construction in the country. And here it is, the Auditor General's department requests a status report, and you being thrown from side to side. What does that say to the system? What does that say? The public that is looking on, that are struggling, the public that has issues, what does that say to them? Have you written them severe letters? The second question to you, while you contemplate on that one, you spoke about, Miss Lorelly spoke about the deficiencies of accounting officers, or was it Ms. Gale? Yeah, the deficiencies of accounting officers because of the immaturity and the lack of experience. They fall under the remit probably of training through the Ministry of Public Administration. Am I right? Have you written the Ministry of Public Administration reiterating your findings that there is a deficiency and that the Ministry of Public Administration needs to do something urgently with regards to the training and development of the accounting processes of their accounting officers who you're saying lack experience? I know there's a changing of accounting officers on a regular basis now. People are retiring rapidly. What have you done to inform the Ministry of Public Administration?
Well, I don't think we have written to the ministry, but I thought that this was the purpose of this committee here, to understand the things that prevent us from meeting our mandate and doing our work, and to bring solutions, and maybe to have these solutions transmitted to these people, the necessary entities. I thought that this was the purpose
Forum.
of this. Yes, this is what we do in this forum.
And this has been an ongoing issue over a period of time.
Well, we have noticed there have been a lot of changes with regards to permanent secretaries being moved from one entity, one ministry to the next. And that has caused some problems because, they don't understand the ministry. When you move a permanent secretary too often, that causes problems in itself. We have also observed that some of them lack the experience and you need to build capacity. So we are bringing these things and airing these things in this forum so that maybe something can be done. This committee can have these things addressed.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. I wanted to deal with the question of the overpayments again. And I know that this came up, I think, before when you were with us. And could you tell us where are the major issues of overpayment coming from? Where is that arising most frequently? And what has been has there been any improvement in terms of trying to resolve this problem?
You would find that problem with some of the larger ministries with a lot of outstations or sub-offices where the transfer of information, let's say people going on sick leave, extended sick leave, that kind of thing, it doesn't reach the head office at the required time. So the iris closes off at a certain time, and the data that is required to stop the payment wouldn't reach there until, what, months? Probably months after after time. So these are the things that contribute to overpayments. We have not found any incidents of fraud or fraudulent activity. It seems to be more of a timing problem.
What ministries would be you said big ministries?
Yeah,
so
that would, mostly the top of the list would be Ministry of Education and Health.
There's large numbers of them.
Yeah.
We had the Ministry of Finance here some time ago, and they were talking about implementing a financial management information system. Have you seen any impact of that, or has there been any progress on that front?
I don't think they have secured a loan, and there is a project manager in place, but we're not aware of anything further that is happening in that regard.
I think we just want to add, though, that while I think the issue of where they've progressed with IFMIS should be addressed to the Ministry of Finance, but what the Ministry of Finance has done is that they've sent out a circular to all accounting officers that they are moving towards, they have introduced IPSAS, which is International Practice Public Accounting Standards, and as a result of that, the format and the way we report on a monthly basis has now to be in compliance with the IPSAS standards. So with effect from April of this year, ministries and departments are required to present monthly statements certified by the accounting officer, which shows both revenue and expenditure on one statement. So they are moving towards having things in place to facilitate the IFMA system on the ground. I can speak of that in terms of how we are being effective in terms of our reporting as well.
Okay. Could you quantify the amount of overpayments that you could, if you could, in general, but so let's understand how big the problem is?
In this year's report, we did not do a quantification with various reasons. I know last year there was one, but at this year's report, we did not have a quantification in a table as presented in the report.
Okay, and what was last year's one? The year before?
I'm sorry, I don't have that figure with us.
You don't have to figure it. Okay.
But I could speak on some of the remedial measures which have been posted since August 1988 when it comes to overpayments. This thing has been well studied and documented over the years, and they are quoted in the Comptroller of Accounts Circular number 20 dated 17 August 1988, and speaks about prompt notification of the payroll section of changes in salary. It talks about correct determination of incremental points and so on. So it's not as if the ministries are not aware of what is required in order to rectify the problems. What they need to do is within each ministry, they need to look at their systems and determine which are their weaknesses when it comes to overpayment and try to tweak it as much as possible in order for the system to be improved. It may not necessarily be eradicated completely, but certainly some action could be taken to improve and reduce the amount of overpayments within each ministry on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. Because you keep flagging it, so we assume it's a big problem. I mean, otherwise you wouldn't be mentioning it so often.
Mr. Henry, I just want to add to what Mr. Caesar has alluded to. If you would notice what he has indicated, that some of the issues for overpayment, one, as Mr. Peters has indicated, is a timing, but we come back to the same issue again of increments being put in the correct place, which comes back to against about the whole acting, about getting the necessary authorizations in a timely manner, about promotions being done by, you see, so the solution is really a solution that has to be looked at as our whole system of way of doing business, a way of recording. Because as we alluded to, Mr. Ali alluded to since last year in his opening address, we have been doing business before most of us who are present with you here today were born. And so we are doing business in that same manner. We're tweaking it here and there by trying to bring in little software here, software there, software there. But, you know, we're not looking, in my view, and I'm only speaking for myself at this point, in a holistic manner as the things that impact on the whole way the system is done. That, you know, so I think that basically is an issue that needs to be looked at.
But, I mean, we are not the only country in the world with a public service. I mean, so what is the international standard? I mean, what are we missing here?
Realize that internationally, even if we look in our own Caribbean region, that a lot of the public servants in the Caribbean have moved forward in a number of ways. If we look at Barbados, Barbados is no longer presenting financial statements on a cash basis. Barbados financial statements are being presented on an accrual basis. You look at the Cayman Islands. The Cayman Islands is also presenting their financial statements on an accrual basis. If we look at Jamaica, while Jamaica is doing a cash basis, they are also presenting their information in a different format. Moreover, in Jamaica, their financial statements, each ministry's separate accounts is certified by the Auditor General as well as the consolidated account. So that if you look at even within our own region, there are moves towards modernizing their processes. Somehow, somewhere along the line, we have not really moved with the same level of speed as others in terms of modernizing the processes, our processes.
And I would want to add, Dr. Henry, that maybe we need to more fully utilize our IT systems, because we have an IRIS system already. And where we speak about a timing difference, creating these overpayments, I don't see that it is rocket science to have these outstations like Agriculture, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, whatever, input information that would hit the system in real time to prevent these overpayments. I think that is being done worldwide, internationally. So I don't see the reason why we can't implement that system here and fully utilize our IT systems that already exist.
Okay, that's a good point. I mean, because I would hope that all these ministries and somehow connected. I mean, even if it's just Wi-Fi or just a normal internet. I mean, so I think that yes. So the days with the excuse of taking 6 months or whatever to get information just seems to be very lame right now. And we have to find a way to upgrade to modern systems. But I take your point that given our existing technology, we should be able to overcome these problems. Yeah.
The Auditor General, you mentioned last time that the Irish system would properly implemented would take care of the pension issue. Would that also take care of this overpayment issue?
Yes, it would.
Okay. Who is in charge of the overall Irish system?
It's the Ministry of Public Administration.
Okay. And is there a special department in there that is in charge of it? Is it ICT or IT or something like that?
No, I don't know.
You don't know?
Yeah.
Do you know?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, the IRS system, they are currently doing an upgrade of the system because for years they were requesting funding for upgrade, but I'm happy to report that recently they are in progress. In progress is an upgrade. IRS system encompasses 3 entities, which is Service Commission. They are in charge of the IRS, the human resource aspect.
Yes.
Then we have IGP, which is the payroll aspect, and that is...
So service commissions would really be outside
Yeah.
of public administration?
Yeah, but Ministry of Public Administration is also part of the 3 or 4 entities that were responsible for the upgrade.
Okay, so it's service commission, entities within public administration, and what else?
Treasury Division.
Treasury.
They are
So
responsible for the
that
payroll
makes
aspect.
the money.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand. So it really is an implementation and integration issue. Yes. Yes. Okay, I want to get back to a couple of things here. You know, we dealt with the whole issue of rental of unoccupied property. And on page 32 here, you have the $53 million that you mentioned was paid over a period of time for a property that was unoccupied in Barataria, waiting to be outfitted. Is that still continuing or is that finished now?
It has since ceased since
It has
July
ceased?
2016.
Okay, what institution is that, may I ask?
It's the Chief Personnel Officer.
Okay, so
Office.
CPO's
CPO's
office, under the CPO's remit. Okay, and then I wanted to ask some other questions that are related to basically revenue and concerns about issues of revenue. When you look at Customs and Excise Division on page 33, you have total commitments 38 million plus. And then you have the vote book 725,000, a difference of 37 million. All right, the list of outstanding commitments figure of 25 million plus by 12 million, and the schedule of accounts figure of 826,907.64 by $37.1 million. How do you explain something like that? And what goes on there that makes this possible and recurrent from year to year? Because I remember asking questions last year about immigration, about Customs and Excise Division.
I would like to cite problems with training of staff, lack of...
But that is a 37 million discrepancy.
Yeah.
Accounted for by lack of training of staff?
Yeah, because I think the check staff function, the people in the accounts department who have oversight over the records are not performing as they should. And errors are being made in the records, or incomplete records as the case may be, the records not being properly updated. So it's more a function of inadequate training or supervision as far as the record handling is concerned, and as a result, a lot of errors.
The people who are
omissions
responsible for this,
take place.
do they balance the books every day?
Well,
Are they supposed to?
Ideally, they have
Yeah,
a
okay.
check staff function.
Do they have any other job but to make sure that these numbers are reconciled and inputted so that they can be reconciled?
From where I speak, it's supposed to be a main function of the job spec. So
They have other aspects
yes,
of their
they will
jobs,
have
is
other
what I'm
aspects
asking.
of their job to
All
do
right,
as
so it's
well.
not a dedicated,
No,
okay.
no.
All right, so that is where the problem is then.
Mr. Chairman.
You don't
there-
have a dedicated function, yeah.
There's also the problem of acting coming up all across the public service, and
Of
there's
what?
there's a lot of movement across the public
Yes,
service.
yes.
So that
Yes,
is one of
I'm
the
aware.
problems
And
contributing to
that
that. Yeah.
issue has come up before too, that when you move people, especially in accounting and internal audit, you cause particular problems, you know. So we take that into account. Then another issue that I wanted to flag is on page 53, having to do with the operation of the quarries. Now, the status of 103 operational quarries, is that today an accurate number of what is happening? Or is it likely to be more than 103? Are all the quarries that are operational accounted for in this number of 103? So there might be more.
Yeah, there will be more.
All right. How would we know that? It would take us another audit to do that? Would we know by the next audit, or would the audits continue to be less accurate than the reality because they proliferate and you do not know?
Well, one thing we're going to do is expand the scope when it comes to revenue. This would fall under revenue, and we'll be taking a closer look at quarries as well when we go to Ministry of Energy.
Okay, how does the breakdown here and the meaning of the breakdown affect the effective management of this sector? So you have expired licenses, 76. I suspect they continue to operate with expired licenses. Then you have operating without licenses. So they are on license, but they're operating. Then you have operating with licenses, only 7. And then you have new application 1. So out of the 103, there are only 7 quarries operating legally. All right? Is this a persistent situation, or is this something that happened just so? Or is it likely to get worse? How can it get better? Because isn't the operation of these entities legally an important part of being able to generate the revenue that you need to generate in the country? And there's another side too of quarries that are quite disturbing, because when you're a quarry owner, you have access to dynamite and all kinds of things, and I think that that is a national security situation that we need to take into account in the operation of quarries. This is a different world we're dealing with. Today in London, we had another problem, 3 in a row, 1 in Manchester and 2 in London. And it is something that one needs to take into account. We can't operate like how we operated 20 years ago. This is a serious matter. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, relatively recently we met with the TTEITI, Trinidad and Tobago Extractive Industries Transparency Institute.
Right, I know that we signed on to that now, yes.
Yes, and they informed us that currently the process to become licensed as a quarry owner is extremely onerous, extremely burdensome, very protracted, very drawn out. And while some persons are somewhat willing to become licensed, they need assistance from the persons overseeing the process, and apparently the relevant bodies, I'm not certain at this point who, but they are apparently in a process right now where they are working along with quarry owners to assist them in becoming licensed so that they could be on the book, so that the necessary royalties could be tracked and paid. Work is being done in terms of assisting owners with the licensing process.
Okay, so some new infrastructure or better infrastructure needs to be done to facilitate the process.
Yes.
But I think a regime like this, it's important to bring it under legal jurisdiction, you know. To me, there are too many risks, not just the revenue risk, but there are other risks.
Yes.
Environment, I mentioned the national security issues.
That is
you know,
true.
that need to be addressed here.
And apparently they mentioned they also working on regulating it in a more efficient way.
You see, and from a sample of 20 operational queries, I mean, and that's your work, it says here production data relating to the quantity of minerals mined, processed, and sold for 17 operators was not submitted. I mean, you don't even know how much they dig out. Then royalties were not collected from 16 operators, so that means they haven't paid. And then 5 operators mining on private land did not provide proof of ownership. Well, I suspect that's part of the illegal quarrying that is going on. But from every point of view, this is an important sector. You know, we once used to have the ministry called Petroleum and Mines, you know. So, because it was an important sector for construction and other things. And the mining for petroleum was seen as a certain kind of activity. And then we have another one here, Ministry of Works, though. Page 55. Several constraints were encountered in an attempt to verify the accuracy of figures reflected. Then you have machine-generated receipts issues were faded and eligible. I imagine there's a storage issue, so I won't dwell on that, although it could, and that could be fixed. Cash transactions were recorded on numerous loose pages. Now, this is problematic. Cash transactions were recorded on numerous loose pages which were not filed in chronological sequence. They were strewn at various locations within the office, wherever space was found, such as under counters and in the storeroom. Monthly cumulative totals were not recorded in the cash book for each of the 43 items of revenue. I imagine what this is saying is that there are 43 items of revenue under the Ministry of Works, and each one of them had a problem. Is that what it means? A difference of 15 million plus, I won't read all the numbers, was noted between the total revenue of the Treasury card of 138.8 million and the statement receipts and disbursements, it was 123. So that is upwards of what? 12, 13, 14 million. You know, how do we deal with these things? Because I'm sure I'm sure that the issue is not an issue of, you know, corruption or stealing money. But one can't be sure when you see numbers like these. And then the second thing is, how do you get it right so that it doesn't give this impression, you know?
Chairman, let me just correct something. This is just a transport commissioner that falls within the Ministry of Works and Transport, not the Ministry of Works.
Okay.
But it's coming back down to training, supervision, the right people in the right place, that kind of thing.
No, but remember, I'm not doing these things by guess. When you deal with quarries, I think that we know that there is an issue in the public domain about how these things operate and whether government gets any decent revenue from it. Okay? I think that's an issue. I think people complain all the time about the Transport Commissioner's office and the licensing office, and the fact that there are not just discrepancies, but people have alleged acts of corruption involving those institutions. So, I mean, I would think that if you have discrepancies like these showing up for areas in which in the public domain there is a feeling that things are not right, that we should try and find a way of making sure that we do not leave loopholes through dysfunctionalities to make the reputation that they have gained a reality in fact. You know, this is what I'm getting at with some of these institutions. You see, if we tighten up this and get them to do what is required and reconcile their accounts and to have their paperwork done properly, then, you know, chances are that we could solve some of the problems that people feel are taking place inside of these institutions, don't you think?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, but I think also that computerization would solve that problem in most of these cases. In terms that cash has been recorded, you can apply for a license online, all these things.
Yes.
Yeah.
But anyway, go ahead.
No, my last area of inquiry is looking at the issue you were just alluding to with computerization and some of your findings in terms of the IT governance. I see that we have problems with no strategic plans were found for many of the entities, and no kind of policies or procedures were in place to govern the use of IT in many of the entities. I find that hard to believe, that there must be something in place. I mean, could you help me out here? What did you actually find?
Based on the findings of our audit, we had conducted an audit of general controls in a few selected ministries and departments. What we found that although there is a strategic plan, they had not developed an IT strategic plan, which would have been aligned to their ministry's strategic plan. In most instances, they were just, there might be some parts of their strategic plan that alludes to IT and their objectives, but not a separate IT strategic plan. A lot of the issues identified dealt with IT governance, in that a lot of the policies and procedures were lacking. There was one draft policy done by Ministry of Public Art in 1997, and that was the last approved policy that we saw.
1997?
Yeah, most of the policies that existed at the ministries were draft policies.
And so even then it was still a draft, and it has remained a draft 20 years later?
No, the approved policy is in 1997.
Okay.
Subsequent to that, sometimes each ministry, what we found is that they had their own draft policies. And what we are saying, in order to ensure proper IT governance, then the Ministry of Public Administration needs to fulfill their role as a monitoring in terms of ICT, where they can have an overarching policy, and then each ministry could customize the policy depending on the uniqueness of their information systems. Since we are seeing the increase in ICT at the ministries, and with the upgrade of IRIS, for example, or the introduction of IFMIS, then we would have to have all those policies approved, those policies shared with the users of the information system to ensure that we have proper controls in place.
Okay, so I was trying to get an idea, well, what obtains now? What is the state of play? So, but do these ministries do they follow basic guidelines?
In most instances, they have informal procedures that they do follow. I must say the IT staff at the ministries, although they, as I said, they won't approve policies, they do follow informally international guidelines. So what we recommend is that the ministry should seek to adopt an international standard. Now, there is the COVID governance framework that they could adopt, and also there, what we also recommend is the information security ISO standards 27001 requirements and 27002 implementation. So at least they could start with the basic policies, especially relating to information security.
Okay, I'm good.
Chair, through you. I'm on page 36, Ministry of Health again. And there's something in your report here that's alarming. That chemicals entering the country are not subjected to any checks at the port of entry, but are checked after relocation to the importer's premises. It's a contravention based upon the regulations 53. Does that still exist?
Nothing has changed since we have to follow up during this audit cycle. We'll check it through in this audit cycle. Nothing has improved to our knowledge since, but we'll follow up on it.
Shouldn't this have gotten a triple red flag? Not just a red flag. I mean, there should have been a triple red flag because you're talking about importers importing chemicals and pesticides into a country. There are no checks at the ports of entry. Anything can happen between the ports of entry and it being on the importer's location or business place. That is a dangerous entity.
Well, we have raised it with the accounting officer, and again, we'll follow up to see what has been done. But I understand the need for expediency in this particular area.
Especially at the time we are living in. And not only that, you have also reiterated the fact that the laboratory used for testing was shut down since 2014. So who is certifying the chemicals? What agencies are being used by the Ministry of Health to certify that these chemicals are what they were imported to be and the intention for which these chemicals are imported? That's a dangerous entity. That's a real loophole in the system.
Webster, Roy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Auditor General, in an earlier response to the chairman, you noted that you next audit cycle you look more in depth, take a more in depth look at the revenue side. I wanted to know if the inability to do it this time was it because of staffing?
Well, some of the obstacles with respect to the Inland Revenue Division, or the Board of Inland Revenue, I should say, some of those obstacles will be removed, and we had some bilateral discussions with the board, the chairman of the board, to have some of the obstacles removed prior to the implementation of the amendment to the Income Tax Act. And given the whole revenue situation, we thought it wise to start taking a closer look at the whole revenue from the public account side.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Just to clarify and just to add to that, the main obstacle so far has been the legal challenge, access to the information which we reported is being addressed.
All right, any questions? All right, a couple of things. The issue of procurement, I noticed you had 2 references to it here, in anticipation of new procurement regulation and so on. Have there been any concerns by the Auditor General about procurement practices by any of the ministries under review in this 2016 report? Have issues come up that need to be paid attention to or need to be corrected?
Yes, we had one such issue arise at the High Commission South Africa, where it's in the report where we raised concerns about the procurement process. And so it's an area that we have red flagged, and we have recommended that these controls be put in place or to treat with the whole issue there, especially in South Africa, where we visited last year.
So it's not, so that it does not recur?
So that yes.
Do you anticipate that well, first of all, are you involved at all in anything related to the establishment of the procurement agency, and should you be?
No, we are not involved at this time.
But should you be? I'm asking.
I think if you have to look at it, what our role is, remember that we have to go in and assess what is taking place, evaluate whether or not good governance is taking place. So therefore, one would assume from that particular role that we more have an oversight role. However, I think we need to be involved in the loop to assess where it is going so that we can know how to position ourselves and what we need to do to retool ourselves with regard to the implementation of this new particular policy and act. I would say, though, that by and large, the Control of Accounts and the Ministry of Finance have sought to keep us in the loop. They have sought to involve our staff per se in particular training initiatives that they have initiated, and they continue to do so. And we at the higher level have been exposed to the implications of the act when it comes into being. We did have one great concern, and I think legal would address to that, in that we, according to the act, would be the auditors of the procurement regulator. At the same time, we also have to be in compliance with the requirements of the act. So I think we had raised it at a particular forum. I don't know if Ms. Cockburn would want to expand on that.
Well, is there a contradiction?
It's a conflict of interest, I would think, yes.
All right, let's examine that just for a minute now. You were going to say something, Ms. Cockburn?
Not particularly. That is more or less the situation, and it was raised with the persons with responsibility for the act, and they indicated they would look into it to see what alternative may exist.
Okay. No, but I mean, if there's a procurement law and the Auditor General's department is a department that procures, obviously you have to comply with the law. But the Auditor General's department is, remember, the procurement regulatory agencies, as it is established by law, is accountable to the Parliament. So they come to the Parliament and they provide all the information, they give it to Parliament, and then it has some kind of scrutiny. Parliament has some scrutiny of it. But the actual functioning of the procurement regulatory agency and their income, their expenditure, their operations, etc., wouldn't that normally be under the jurisdiction of the Auditor General? And would that constitute a conflict of interest? I don't see it.
As we speak right now, when we were peer-reviewed, for example, we are the auditors we were peer-reviewed by our international, right, Austria.
Yes.
We are the auditors of the Treasury. The Treasury are our auditors. They deem that to be a conflict of interest.
Yeah, well, we raised that, remember,
Yes,
last year?
correct.
What is the situation with that? Let me just follow up that. What has happened since then? Because we, in fact, made a recommendation that that should not be so. All right?
It's a legislative, right?
What has happened in the follow-up?
Nicole.
So far, we have met with the Ministry of Finance on the issue because the law which requires that to be the setup for now is under their purview, and they would have to seek to amend it to create a change. We have met with them. Discussions are ongoing, but no firm move to date with respect to having the necessary amendments done.
Okay. All right.
So the
it's an
situation
ongoing
persists.
dialogue
Yes.
then, but unresolved.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And all right, now that you've flagged the issue of the procurement regulator, we will look at it and see. We may need to have another conversation, not necessarily in this forum, but just to kind of clarify it. And I wanted to ask, we've talked about some things that have persisted. We've talked about some things that are not so good. Maybe they got worse, I don't know. But are there things that have gotten better that you can flag, and things that we can do that could improve the system, such as we have?
Well, one area that comes to my mind immediately is that we have seen improvement, is that I find that PSs are responding promptly, more or less, most of them, I would say, to our management letters. We are no longer being ignored. So I would say, I would say that is a major improvement.
Okay. So you're getting better response to your management letters?
Yes,
Okay.
and more timely responses to our management letters.
I think too that when the committee raises certain issues, we're not only with us, but when the particular ministries and departments come, I mean, we are seeing efforts being made at a much higher level
To make
to make the
progress.
necessary progress and changes. Yeah.
Okay, so, well, I mean, that's valuable feedback, I think. What are some of the things that you think might be, I mean, I don't want you to give a whole long list. I know you have done things. I mean, you mentioned in 1988, for instance, you made certain recommendations that have not all been implemented and so on. But, I mean, if you had to say maybe 2 or 3 things that we could actually sort of action and insist upon that would make a decisive difference in the system, what would those be?
Well, I think the first one would be getting the IRIS system
Okay,
fully
so IRIS.
implementational.
Okay, that's good. That's very tangible. Okay.
And we are looking to, as I said, we're looking to get access to Board of Inland Revenue records, so we'll be able to give you a better idea of the revenue collection in the next financial year. And then the IFMIS system also, we need to get that going in order to have everything fully computerized.
Okay.
So
Well,
those
we'll
are
make.
the 3 areas.
Well, we already made a recommendation on BIR, and you've made some progress, I think. But certainly the IRIS and the ISMIS, I think we made a strong recommendation on ISMIS last time. It's just that, I mean, I don't know if it has progressed as fast as it needed to be. And we'll certainly make the recommendation on IRIS. What about the Ministry of Energy revenue issue I raised with you? I mean, what can we do about that? Because it seems to me that that's an important thing.
I think, Mr.
You see, it's not that anybody is doing anything wrong. I'm not saying that anybody is doing anything wrong. It's just that you don't have the knowledge which you should have.
I think, sir, just to speak about both the quarrying and the Ministry of Energy, I think when we were assessing the risk profile of that particular ministry, this is the reason why we decided to expand on the revenue scope and to get a more detailed, first of all, from our own understanding, we are seeking to have a better knowledge of how this this ministry works, how it functions.
All right.
I think we really need to understand that what goes into it, so that we could do a better program of work to assess whether or not revenue collection, whether there are leakages in terms of revenue collection. But Mr. Peters, in further breaking down the analysis, have noted too that there seems to be an overarching problem in terms of the governance, in terms of monitoring, and I don't know if Mr. Peters wished to speak on that part.
Okay.
Well, it all comes down to the Ministry of Energy and building their capacity to monitor the various areas. Because I think we spoke about some staffing issues there as well, so they would need some staffing
yeah,
issues, so
sorry.
they would need to deal with that.
All right, okay. Yeah, Ms. Cockburn.
Just one very minor point, not that it may be any consolation, but TTEITI informed us that the problem of governments not being able to ascertain exactly how much is due to them from companies in the energy sector, etc., is not unique to Trinidad and Tobago, and it's a problem and issue worldwide, which is being addressed by the relevant international bodies. So, just so we know, it's not unique to us.
I agree.
No consolation, but
I agree, and I know that, but I mean, we should do better. Yeah. Okay. All right. Are there any questions you'd like to ask us, or anything that you feel that we can help you with? We would like to continue the collaboration with the Auditor General's department. I think we've had a good, constructive, mutually supportive relationship, and we're getting some results. I mean, not as much as we would like, and not as intense as we would like, but we're making some progress. And I would like to deepen and strengthen that relationship so that we can make the system better, because, I mean, the world is changing at a rapid rate, you know, and we're really sort of lagging behind. Any things that you'd like to raise with us?
Well, as I mentioned before, Mr. Chairman, the IRS system is very critical here in terms of people getting their pension on time. That's a critical area for our citizens of the country, because people are crying out for their pension. I get lots of calls every day in terms of trying to help people, you know, dealing with the control of accounts, and that area needs to be stepped up.
Okay. All right, well, thank you
I
very
would
much.
just like to ask Mr. Chairman, before we end, when the ministries are called before you all in the same manner that we have been called today, and you ask them about concerns that we have raised, does the committee have the power to insist that the changes or the solutions that we come up with have been implemented, or is it just a matter of moral suasion?
Well, it's a mix. It doesn't have, the committee doesn't have the power, because we don't have the executive authority that is required. But I mean, we do make a report to Parliament, and Parliament is, I mean, the executive responds to Parliament. I mean, that's how it works. And the ministries actually respond to the recommendations that we make and say what they have done, or why they disagree, or why they cannot do it, or how long it will take to do so and so. So that they are responsive. I will not say that they do not respond. They don't ignore us, is what I would say. All right? And generally, if we set a deadline or something and they cannot meet it, they will write, they will communicate and say, we would like a longer period. So, which means that they are actively pursuing or considering what we're doing. All right, so at that level, something happens. Yes?
We just wanted to draw attention to the fact that, you know, as you alluded to, things are changing at a rapid pace. And therefore, we as an organization, as the Auditor General's Department, we need to be continuously keeping abreast of the standards that exist, not only in the auditing and the accounting world, but in terms of the standards that exist for the various ministries and entities in terms of what they are required to do. As a result of that, you know, we have some resource limitations, and we have recognized that we have some resource limitations. We are seeking at present, and we are working to receive the particular funding, to really take a holistic look at our organization with a view towards perhaps an organizational review of ourselves and what we do and how we retooled. The Auditor General over time have been seeking to get assistance from larger audit offices like the National Audit Office of the UK to provide us with certain upgraded tools. And we want to really continue in that endeavor, because I mean, we recognize that we are here for the public, and we are here, you know, to facilitate the public accounts on all the various committees, to ensuring that good delivery is really done in terms of the services that are being offered by the state. And so we are recognizing that we do have some limitations as well, in terms of resource limitations, in terms of capacity limitations, in terms of current tools and methodologies that are being applied that needs to be strengthened. But we are working towards improving those things.
Yes, and I think you should, and we would encourage you to proceed. I want to say that from this committee's point of view, in the first report that we did, we actually, and was laid in Parliament, we recommended autonomy for the Auditor General's office. We recommended autonomy with independence, including appropriations, strategy and allocation and independence. And we have also, I think we included in that report the fact that the Auditor General's office, the Procurement Regulatory Office, based on the new legislation, and campaign finance reform were critical elements to ensure that we have some degree of sanity, so to speak, in terms of accountability in the national system. So the committee has been very good from that point of view, and we have been basically, by consensus, agreed that strengthening the Auditor General's office, having a strong procurement office, and dealing with campaign finance reform could make a big difference in the country. I mean, all the problems will not go away, but you could minimize the problems and you could lessen their occurrence. And, if you have sanctions for violation, I mean, well, then the police, the courts, etc., will deal with those matters. That is not our business,
I just like to get back quickly to the Ministry of Energy. Just one issue I'd like you all to raise if they do come before this panel, as to determine what is the reason why they have this manpower shortage when it comes to verification of the production data at source. They say they have a manpower shortage, and I mean, it's a critical area, it's the main revenue earner of the country, and they claim that they have doing 25% of the verification of the source of the production data at source. Determine why it is they have this manpower shortage and why they have not filled the shortage so as to improve the revenue collection within the Ministry of Energy.
We will do that when we call them here, but when you do your next report based on your engagement, you must flag the issue as a real issue that needs to be addressed. So we will have a double opportunity to deal with it.
You will
okay?
do.
All right, thank you very, very much. I want to thank my colleagues. They were all very alert and focused today. And I thought from the public point of view, they got, from the public point of view, the public would have gotten a lot of important information about the functioning of the system. I want to thank the media for being here, and we hope that they will cover the material so more people will be aware of what's happening. Members of the public gallery, we thank you for coming. And you, Auditor General, and your entire team, I want to thank you very much. And as I said, we want to strengthen and deepen the relationship in the national interest and in the interest of the entire state system, really, and accountability and performance in the state system. And we thank you for your engagement this morning and for your candid answers and responses. Thank you very, very much.